Okay, hello everybody. Hello, welcome in. Welcome to the Supervisors in Government Community of Practice virtual networking event here. We'll give everyone a moment or two to join us. But in the meantime, we do have a fun little icebreaker. If you want to put your answers in the chat, with Halloween being on Friday, we're talking about favorite Halloween candy. So peanut M&Ms, always a classic. Maddie, we love those. Sharon, what off the top of your head, what's your favorite?
Matt, actually, the peanut M&Ms that Maddie said, I really love
Can't go
those.
wrong.
But I would say Snickers and Reese's are
Yes, can't go wrong.
close high.
Oh, I love it. Here we go. Here's everybody's answers in here. Candy corn is always shocking to me. I'm not in it. Don't love the candy corn. But now I see it twice, so I'm in the minority here. Um, I'm a sour candy girly. So I love the Sour Patch Kids. That's my favorite.
That's my favorite food to eat when I go to the movies. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
yeah. On board. Nerds, always a good one. Sour Trader Joe's gummies or chocolate. Love that.
Mm.
Reese's Cups, sugar. It's basically just sugar. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, thanks for sharing, everyone. And as a reminder, my name's Leah Anderson. I'm the Digital Marketing Director here at GovLoop. If this is your first time on a Supervisors in Government Community of Practice, thanks so much for being here. This is a place where we meet virtually, of course, but every month to talk about different topics that are relevant for supervisors in government or people who are interested in moving into supervisory or management roles in government. And if you've been with us before, welcome back. We're thrilled you're here. And just as a reminder, some of you are already in here, but please feel free to use that chat today. It's a really great place for you guys to put comments and questions and also connect with each other. So I'm sure there's some people from the same agency in here, but we might not know if you don't let us know in the chat. And then finally, we do have a LinkedIn group for this group as well. So if you have more questions or comments or follow-up thoughts after this conversation, please feel free to go to that LinkedIn group. It will be linked in the follow-up email, but we really want to encourage you all to keep connecting with each other when you can. But we can go ahead and get into it. We're joined today by Sharon Swab, who's a career consultant, and we're thrilled to have you with us, Sharon.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So our topic for today is the do's and don'ts of delegation. And what we usually like to do with these conversations is kind of start high level, start kind of broadly, so we all can work with, a common definition or a common concept here around the topic at hand. So for you, Sharon, in your perspective, what is delegation, and then maybe what is it not?
Okay, that's a great question. I would definitely say that when it comes to delegation, the way that I would define it is the intentional process of handing over a task, a responsibility, and even potentially authority to other members of your group for the purpose of reaching a shared goal. Now,
Mhm.
the reason I like to define it this way is mainly for the beginning part. So the intentionality piece is critical. So in that particular respect, like for delegation to be effective, you have to give it thought.
Mhm.
So whether that is something along the lines of planning in advance, like what does this project require? How would I want to separate it out into different delegated tasks? To even who's the best person on the team to handle this task? Do I need to train any members of my team? How do I need to communicate with them regarding this project? There's a lot of intentionality that goes into effective delegation.
Mhm.
In terms of what it's not, I would definitely say it's not just handing off work. And especially like when you're thinking about giving tasks to someone else, yes, it's for the betterment of the group and for the more effective execution of the shared goal. But it also, you want to be thinking about how is that person going to grow? So, not just handing off work, not just giving over menial tasks that don't really give a lot of career growth opportunities to other members of your team. I would say that's one way of saying things that delegation is not.
Mhm.
What I would probably add is also it's not abdicating responsibility. So not just like delegating something and providing no room for follow-up or no room for guidance. And lastly, I would also say that it's not hovering and just micromanaging. So essentially, that would be like delegating a name only. I
Mhm.
just feel like that breeds mistrust and doesn't actually promote effective growth for both you and for the people that you're delegating the task to.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that's a really great place to start. I love incorporating the intentionality with it. I think that's really strong and really important, and maybe not always included traditionally in the conversation of delegation. So I love that sort of as a takeaway already. That's really helpful. Um, so moving on here, what are some common barriers to delegation and, these common mistakes that we want to avoid, particularly for folks who are just kind of stepping into supervisory or management roles? We can talk about it in that context, but of course, also just common things to avoid in general.
Yeah, I would say I would say three things, but the top two are the ones that I felt most strongly when I was first learning how to delegate
Mhm.
effectively. I would say first and foremost is just trust. Um, it's really difficult, especially if you were the person accountable for a particular project, or if you are the person where essentially the buck stops with you and
Mhm.
the project means a lot to you, to trust that someone's going to do a certain aspect of the project to the standard that you hope they would do it. And so a lot of times, like, I remember personally just trying to get over that trust of like, I need to hand this off and
Mhm.
trust that this person's going to do it well. I will say that's not blind trust if you
Right.
do what we talked about earlier with the intentionality, but still it can be really tough. Um, and then I would also say that time is another barrier to delegation. In a perfect world, you would have all of this time to think through the project, plan it out, how you're going to delegate, train people up. Like you would have so much time to do this. But a lot of times in the real world, you don't. And so sometimes you're going back and forth with, I could do this faster if I just took over it and did it. But it would be more effective and a growth opportunity if I actually delegated some of these tasks out. And so you have that juxtaposition in terms of your decision making. Um,
Mhm.
I would also say another common mistake or a barrier would be trying to really identify members of your team in terms of like who would be a great person for this task.
Mhm.
That kind of ties into time. Like, have you had a chance to get to know your coworkers or the people that you were supervising really well? Have you had a chance to assess like what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses? Um, because again, to make delegation really effective is you want to provide a growth opportunity, but you also want to give a good match in terms of like this is the assignment or this is the responsibility, and here's someone who could really benefit from it, and also here's someone who's going to thrive in that.
That makes a lot of sense. And sort of going back to one of your initial points about what delegation is not. I think there's buried in there too are some things we can avoid too. Like you were saying, delegation isn't just handing over remedial tasks and
Yeah.
saying, like, have it done by end of day with no context or anything like that. And I think maybe sometimes those end up being some things that we delegate because we're like, oh, this is okay. Like if they don't do it the way I want it, it's still going to be fine. Like that fear trust issue. So can we talk to that a little bit more? Like how can we kind of increase trust a little bit, especially again, if our fear is like it's just not going to be done the way we want it to be done?
So I would say a couple of different things to help overcome trust. One piece I would say is to be strategic in terms of the delegation. So again, that good match between here's a task and here's an individual who has the propensity, the skill set, the character, the personality to do it well.
Hmm.
Um, so being able to have a good match there is essentially going to make you a little less fearful of giving them
Right.
that responsibility. But I would also say like knowing that this is something they could benefit from in terms of a growth opportunity. I'll give an example. So when I was working at GW, my boss knew that I wanted to do career coaching, not just in the general sense, but I also wanted to do career coaching tied to study abroad. And so I needed more international education experience opportunities. And so he had the opportunity in his office to delegate out the management of a program that took students to Japan once a year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do not speak Japanese. I studied Latin America in grad
Mm-hmm.
school. And so there was definitely a growth opportunity there for me.
Right.
But he knew like I had the propensity, I had the passion for it, and I had the initial skill set to do it well. And so I think that was like a really good match in him delegating that project to me. So that was an opportunity where he could trust with some confidence that I would
Mm-hmm.
do a good job with it. I would also say communication is key in terms of the trust piece.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I like to do is I like to, if I'm going to delegate out a task, I like to talk to you about it in person. And
Mm-hmm.
then I like to follow up with an email so that everything is clear. Like, this is the goal, this is the task, these are the resources, here's how you reach me for support. You know, like, here are the milestones that we need to hit and the deadlines. I like everything to be very clear because then
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I can trust more that things are going to be done well and that there's accountability on your end and on my end as a supervisor. Um, and then I would also say, in terms of like building trust, I would also say that a great piece to be able to do here too is essentially being able to have the opportunity to train others too. So investing time, and again, this is if you have the time and the foresight of like, I have a project coming up in 6 months. I know it would be a wise thing to be able to delegate out some tasks. Maybe starting in advance and start training people saying, like, hey, I think you could really thrive in this particular skill set. You're going to need this 6 months from now. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
let me get you certified. Maybe let me take some time out of my day to be able to train you in something I currently do in preparation for this. And so now you've had the chance to walk them through that. And then at the appropriate time, you can give that task to them and trust they will execute it effectively. So that's be my a couple of ideas I would say for
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah, that's like the long game version
Yes.
of delegation, which I love though, because it does benefit both parties and the organization. We're building skill sets. I love that approach to it. I was just reading up a little bit on delegation today, and the only other thing I'll say around the this point of like building trust, getting over our own fear of letting something away, is like we can start lower stakes too. You know, like if this is something that you're just getting familiar with as you're looking at tasks and prioritizing things, you can find something that, again, is like lower stakes, but still important, still to your point initially around the, it's contributing to your either team or organizational goal. But, just build up a little bit for everybody might make it a little less scary when we
Yeah.
think about it in that context.
I think that's a great point. I think that's something I've definitely seen in the past, like when earlier in my career, like training interns or training like people who were early in their career. So essentially giving them progressively more difficult tasks to be
Mhm.
able to handle. I think it's great because it also shows like a sense of achievement and a sense of growth for
Mhm.
that individual. But it's also helpful for you because you can focus on other items as a supervisor or manager while this person gets the chance to learn and grow.
Yeah, I like that reframe too. It's like delegation as sort of like a career growth strategy. Like this is how we're doing it. So that's really great. All right, I'll keep going here, but how do you manage or how do you balance empowering your team, but also maintain accountability when delegating tasks?
Yeah, this one's a tough one. But in terms of this, I would say a couple of different things. I think communication is really a huge piece. So in that particular respect, like I like to make sure that everyone is on the same page.
Mhm.
So that could be having a shared tracker. So,
Mhm.
like, I've designated to Cindy, Bob, and Sue these particular projects. They have the authority to make decisions within this particular jurisdiction. Here are the things that they're working on, when they'll be due, and just making that available to the entire team. I'm old school, so I just like a shared Excel document. But in that particular respect, like I really like that because it makes people feel like they have the authority to own the process, but they also have an accountability, whether it's to me or whether it's to other members of their team. And it also, as me as the supervisor, it gives me a chance to have like a bird's eye view of what everyone is working on and how people are effectively working together.
Mhm.
Um, Another piece that I would say is I like to establish like touch points. And again, this depends on the project. How long is it supposed to take? How intensive is this particular initiative? But I like to say like, hey, are we going to do like a weekly check-in or are we going to do a monthly check-in? And I want to use those check-ins as a chance to figure out like, are we hitting any roadblocks? Is there
Hmm.
anything that you need my support on? Is there anything that I'm not doing as your supervisor that I could be doing better? Could be explaining better or that you need more training or resources on.
Hmm.
I really like that opportunity to have like those check-ins and have those milestones because again, between those check-ins, they have the authority and the empowerment to make decisions to grow while executing this task. But it also gives me a chance to make sure that like everything is running smoothly.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm also thinking, there are some people who do want to operate just,
Yeah.
sort of logistically, like deadlines, time frames, like I just want to see it mapped out. And then other folks really, to your point about these check-ins, are going to need to talk something through with you. They're going to need sort of those like conversations to get a little feedback to keep moving forward. So I like your suggestion of both things. It's not just, a list of things to do or communication. It's kind of both, which I think makes a lot of sense.
And I would just add like and this is more so from the career coaching perspective because I kind of nerd out on like understanding personalities and traits
Mhm.
and things of that nature. But absolutely to your point, you know, when you're supervising a team, all those people work differently. And so, like, I'm the type of person where I just need you to give me the big picture and
Mhm.
I like to figure out the details. But there are
Mhm.
other people who really want, like, they want to know all the weeds and all the information. And so, being able, like, whenever you delegate a task out, you have to think about, like, what's that person's personality? How do they work most effectively? How do they communicate most effectively?
Mhm.
So that when you're delegating out that task, you really have empowered them
Mhm.
and you're really leaning into, like, their strengths.
Right. Agree. I think with this next question, we'll sort of get into the structure of, how to pass over information, like what the nitty-gritty of this. So I'm curious, um, your thoughts on it. But we're talking about now operationalizing delegation, so making it happen, which we've been talking about. But are there certain systems or models we can really dig into to track projects and deliverables? You're talking about the shared Excel spreadsheet, but just generally other tips or tools people can consider using.
Yeah, again, I'm pretty old school. I'm sure there's probably like an app out there that does this much more smoothly than I do.
Yeah.
But I like to break down when you're like trying to make delegation in a more practical sense or more operational. I like to do three different stages. So I like to do the planning, the communication, and then the tracking.
Hmm.
So for the planning stage, that is me by myself.
Hmm.
And I usually do like workflow charts or like make an outline. I might pop something into Excel if it helps me to visualize it better. But essentially, I'm trying to break down the task at hand. Like, what are the different component parts? What are the milestones that need to be reached? What are some areas where I could use some help if I delegated out the particular task? And then ideas about like who would be a good person to do
Hmm.
this. So like that is me brainstorming and writing things out. Um, Again, there's probably an app that does it much better than I do. But I really just use like basic platforms in that particular sense. And sometimes I even just write things out by hand. I'm not
Hmm.
afraid to use like a chalkboard. um, Another piece I would say, so that's the planning aspect. But then the communication piece, I told you, like, I like to have individual meetings when I'm handing things over.
Hmm.
I also like to send follow-up emails so we're all on the same page and there's no hopefully no confusion.
Hmm.
Another thing that I really like to do in terms of communication is, and this goes a little bit more so to training people so that they can feel more empowered and that they have what they need
Hmm.
to be able to do this effectively. But when it comes to training, I'm a big fan of watch me do it,
Yeah.
then I watch you do it,
Right.
and then I give you the freedom to do it yourself, unless there's some reason why we need to do it multiple times.
Hmm.
Um, and so if there is a particular task that's coming up, so for instance, like one of the things we did when I was a career coach at GW is we did like these um, career presentations where we brought in different employers to speak to the students. And we had interns in the office and they were assisting us. And so I essentially like walked them through, like, here are the logistics, and I want you to watch me do it. And then for the next event, I watched them do it. And then I essentially was like, this is the event. I want you to go ahead and plan all of the logistics related to it, and here are the check-ins, but essentially like you are in charge. And they did a beautiful job. So I like that in terms of like an operational, easy to follow way of saying, like, how am I going to train people so that they feel confident in being able to take on this delegated task?
Mhm.
Um, I would also say, like, in terms of the tracking, I honestly use shared documents a
Mhm.
lot. Whether you're in Dropbox or whether you're in Google Docs or something of that particular means, I really like transparency on a team, so that everyone has a sense of like who is in charge of what.
Mhm.
And so they have a sense of like, who can I go to for particular questions? Understanding that if I'm in that supervisor role, they can ultimately come to me if there's ever a conflict or a question that truly needs to be answered, from that particular respect. So I would say when it comes to operationalizing delegation, I always break it into the planning stage, which is me by myself, the
Mhm.
communication stage, which I really want everything in writing, and then the tracking stage, like this is shared documents, shared workflows, shared taskers, things of that nature, so that everyone can feel like they're on the same page.
Yeah, I love that. The share, I mean, what did we do before shared documents? It's
Probably,
crazy.
probably a lot more meetings.
I mean, the version control alone, it just, I shudder thinking about what it used to be like passing docs back and forth. So, yeah, if that's not part of your process now, please make it. It'll change your life. It'll change your life. But this is something we, as in we at GovLoop, can help you all out with too. We do have some resources and we'll link things in the follow-up email too, just places to look for those different systems or strategies, because there's all these different approaches to your point, Sharon, of like, we have different personalities. Some things click with us more easily than others. So we'll be sure to link some of those. I think I came across like a prioritization matrix today, and that is another thing that can just help you figure out
Yeah.
when something needs to get done, who on your team might be able to take it. So there are lots of tools out there, and we'll help source some of those for you all, so it's not so overwhelming. We have one question left, which I think that means we'll have a little bit of time to take an audience question or two, but I, on the fly, I'm curious if you guys in the chat while Sharon's answering this next question, if you can maybe name like in a word or two what the biggest barrier for yourself is in regards to delegation. I'm just really curious. I want to see if there's any patterns that come up in your answers. So again, what's the barrier to delegation? And then maybe we can address that as the last question here. So while you all are putting that in the chat, we will come right back to it, I promise. But Sharon, the last question for you from our five here is just, thinking back to maybe a time where poor delegation led to issues or problems on your team and what your takeaways or sort of lessons learned from that experience were.
Yeah. So I would say in a nutshell, a really humbling experience for me was essentially realizing that not everyone like essentially knows what I know.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and I was making the assumption that they did. So let me explain. I was in charge of various review committees in my time as a career coach. And one in particular was for this very large mentorship program. So essentially, we were going to select graduate students to participate in the mentorship program with the US Institute of Peace. And we had probably several hundred applications, but only about 40 to 60 spots. So it was a pretty competitive process. I could not review all of them by myself and make a judgment call all by myself. So I delegated that out in terms of appointing other members of my team to be on the review committee. I thought I had done a really good job in terms of like, these are the logistics, here's what you need to be able to do this effectively, here are the deadlines. Um, but when we actually sat down as a review committee, I realized that I hadn't set as effective standards of here's how we're going to judge these candidates.
Hmm.
I had done the basics of like GPA and like quality of writing and things of that nature, but I hadn't really shared my vision. And so, an example of this is one of the things I really wanted, because the topic was essentially peace building policy, working with the USIP, I wanted us to pull in candidates who looked at peace building from a variety of different disciplines and
Hmm.
perspectives. So, not just the humanities or social sciences or international affairs, which is the traditional side, but like who's looking at it from a mathematics point of view? Who's looking at it from the sciences? Who's looking at it from like a biology point of view? Because we had opened it up to grad students across the entire university. And the other reviewers weren't looking at it from that perspective. And that was no fault of their own. I just hadn't shared that vision.
Right.
And as a result, what actually happened was, unfortunately, we lost time. It
Mhm.
took us longer to review the particular applications, to deliberate back and forth. And in a situation where, like students are eagerly waiting to know if they've been accepted into this program, I felt very guilty about that. And so that was something that I fixed moving forward whenever I was in charge of a review committee, was essentially sharing, like, this is the vision, like, this is what we're looking for in terms of the candidates. Um, and so I want you to be thinking about that as you're reviewing these so you can help me make really wise decisions about who should participate in this particular program. So that's one example where I felt like if I had done a better job of communicating, uh,
Mhm.
the overall process would have been better.
Right. That's, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a great example because half the time we are moving so fast. It's like, here, can you just take this? And you're not doing that complete context download of this is how I'm thinking about the task in my brain or the project. So I think that is something that happens probably quite a bit, just not on purpose. We're not trying to keep anyone in the dark on purpose,
Yeah.
but it's time and it's all these things. But before we close out here, so I just want to get back to this. What we were saying, what's the major barrier to delegation in your mind for the folks here? And far and away, the big one is trust and then
Yes.
time. So trust already came up, but maybe we can spend one more minute on that so we can help just anybody feel a little bit more confident in getting started, delegating a little bit more, like how that fear, that trust part of it, really like what is your big takeaway around that?
I would say the biggest takeaway is, and actually, I have to give credit to my husband. He said this when we were going back and forth on delegation. He said that when you're a manager or supervisor, it really is about servant leadership. Like, the attention really isn't on you, it's on investing in the members of your team and making sure that they grow as professionals so that the overall work and everything that you're doing turns out more effective.
Mhm.
And I definitely would say that when I think back over my past experiences and every time that I've delegated out, if I took the time to invest in that person, whether that's training, taking the time to better explain my intentions, um, taking the time to essentially say, like, here's the vision or here's the resources that you need. If I took the time to empower them and to match tasks effectively with them, I had a better sigh of relief and a better sense of trust. I actually remember one of the girls that I trained. Um, it reached a point after, honestly, it was after 4 or 5 years where I could give her something and she just knew what I was thinking. And because we had worked together so well already and I had invested so much time in that relationship. And I cannot tell you the relief that I felt whenever I handed her a task because I knew it would be done well. I knew I could trust her completely. And I knew if there was ever a situation or a conflict that she would come to me. And so I know that's not always possible in today's world. But if you can invest the time, I would definitely take it so that you can grow and cultivate trust moving forward.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And we did have a good comment in here from Dan. Maybe, if you do have someone on your team that you have a lot of trust in already, they can sort of oversee a smaller group working on a project. And then the only other thing I'll reiterate, we talked about earlier, Sharon, is what you brought up about shadowing. When you're
Yeah.
thinking of delegating in the concept of time, shadowing or doing a task together for the first time is a really good way to address that point because the thing that you need to get done is still getting done. You're just doing it together. And then hopefully the next time or the time after that, it's only one of you doing the thing that needs to get done. And then you are really delegating. So I think
And
that's good to remember too.
yeah, I think I love that you brought that up. The last thing I'll say on that is just It also gives you a chance to assess that person. Like, how do they
Hmm.
work? Is there any knowledge gap that you didn't realize that they had? It really gives
Right.
you a chance to like figure out like how can I boost this person's capability to do this well.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think also teaching somebody else something also like helps you learn it better. I feel like
That's a
anytime I
fair
do
point.
that, like another question comes up and it's like maybe I hadn't thought about it that way, or that is a good way to do something. So we're always uncovering new things when we do it that way. Um, but yeah, just to wrap up, everyone, thank you so much for taking your time to be here. I know we're a minute over. We're very sensitive of your time. Thank you for being here. We do have another conversation. I see I left the date out here by accident, but it's on November 17th. And the topic is going to be communicating with confidence. I'm still looking for a speaker to join me. So if your ears are perking up and you're interested, this is your sign. Send me an email. Let me know you might want to chat with me. But Sharon, thank you so much for being here today. Very much appreciate your time, your energy, and your expertise. And then I'll say it one more time. Thank you all who are attendees here for joining us today and taking the time for this conversation. So, Sharon, thank you.
Thank you. You enjoy the rest of your day. This was a pleasure.
Likewise, likewise. We'll chat soon. Bye, everybody.